Welcome back. Episode 3. Tomorrow, December 11th, marks 3 years that those of us from Illini Central will be missing Jim Newell. If you're someone who's a friend of mine from where I grew up or somewhere else, you might know who Jim Newell is, but if you don't, Jim Newell was the greatest coach I've ever known. He was a person who meant so much to so many, and even saying that as I listen to that come out of my mouth, that's so understated, almost to the point that makes me think I should start over. Jim Newell graduated from Illini Central in 1975. He went on to serve in the United States Navy. When he got out of the Navy, he came back to Illini Central and worked as a custodian. He was the middle school track coach, he was the middle school cross country coach, and middle school girls volleyball coach. Jim Newell had the ability to make anyone and everyone feel like they were a part of something, and that was his goal. I'll get into that more in a minute. But Jim would do whatever he could to get as many people out for middle school track, to get as many people out for cross country. He had the ability to convince kids to do a sport that literally only a handful even want to do to begin with. Most kids, when you ask them to run cross country, you're like, they know all it is running. Why would I do this? That's the thing that people don't like about doing the other sports, is they don't want to run. He used to get on me about using running as a punishment in basketball because that would cause kids to not want to run cross country, because running should not be and is not a punishment. We would always laugh and go back and forth about that. Jim didn't know a stranger. He would talk to anyone. He made anyone feel like they had known him his and their entire life. I came to interview at Illini Central in June of 2003, and he's the first person I met. I pull up in front of the school in Easton, and here's this scraggly bearded guy working outside, and introduced himself. During part of my interview, he was the person who walked me around the building. And I can remember right where I was standing when I realized that if I get this job, this guy and I are going to be close. And we definitely were. And I miss him every single day. I miss having the opportunity to talk to him about kids and coaching and life and those things. This summer before he passed away, I remember us having a conversation in our cafeteria as we were passing through there at the end of the day, right before he was going to go home. And he made a comment about how everyone is replaceable. And I said to him that that's not true. I'm not sure how I wrote it 3 years ago, but I think I lied. I told him, I said, no, that's not true at all. You are not replaceable. You cannot be replaced. People can do your jobs, but you cannot be replaced. And I was right, 100% right. People have done his jobs, and they've done a great job, and they've tried as hard as they could to do his job, but no one, and I mean no one, has filled his shoes. So the day after he passed away, my Facebook is connected to Illini Central's Facebook. I am the Illini Central Sports Network now, with the help of students. When I started it, it was me, but students help me now. But I obviously run the Facebook page for it. And when Illini Central put out their post about Jimmy's passing, and I posted something about Jimmy's passing on the Sports Network, I spent the entire day that next day going through every single post, okaying ones that were getting flagged or whatever because of the way it's set up, and reading all of them and looking at the shares and seeing the things that people were saying about my and our dear friend. And it was overwhelming. because I'm not joking. I sat at my desk the entire day going through these posts by people that were pouring their heart out about how much this man meant to them. And it was the same refrain over and over again. The same thing from multiple different people. The same thing that we all thought. Any of us who knew him felt this, the same way for the most part. I need to clarify that. For the most part, everyone got the same experience from their time and their relationship with Jim Newell. So at the end of that day, I started to write a blog post that I titled a little bit based off of the things I was seeing and how he was being described. And I sat down there with tears in my eyes and writing and thinking and trying to think about what it was going to be like to not have him in the building anymore, because he was everywhere in the building. He wasn't in just the grade school. He wasn't in just the middle school. He wasn't in just the high school or other parts of the building. He was everywhere. And if you saw him walking through the building, especially the grade school, you would hear Jimmy, 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 and people giving him hugs and people giving him high fives. And there were kids, I've said this many times, there were kids who were yelling Jimmy, didn't even know who Jimmy was. They were just doing it because they knew other people were doing it. They didn't know why they were excited to see this scruffy looking guy in a flannel shirt, but they were excited. Jim, it had that impact on everybody. Middle school kids loved him. And the high school kids who had been with him through practices or other things, maybe they didn't keep doing cross country. Maybe they didn't keep playing volleyball in high school or doing track, but they had a bond with him. And then on social media, like I said, that next day, seeing all of these kids and the things that they would say, kids that did play, kids that turned him down, kids that told him they didn't want to do it, talked about him, said things that let you know how special he was. So I sat down there to write that post, and I titled it, Be Jimmy. I didn't think in the moment that it would become a thing. I knew I'd probably keep typing it as a hashtag on things, hopefully keeping people's mind focused on him and the things that he was. But I sat there and I wrote these things. I'm not going to read the post, but I'm going to highlight the things that I put in there. And this episode, as you saw on the front of it, was titled Be Jimmy with a question mark, because I didn't write that 3 years ago. Be Jimmy. And my question is to you and to me, are you? Are we still? 3 years later, are we still trying? We were all about it 3 years ago. 3 years ago, we were all about how we needed to keep his memory alive by how we treated people. Are you still today? Because I think it's easy 3 years down the road to be like, yeah, we miss him and he was great, but you don't know how mad I am about this. Or or I don't know. I don't think about it as much. Be Jimmy isn't a t-shirt. Be Jimmy wasn't supposed to be a bumper sticker. Be Jimmy wasn't supposed to be a sticker on your laptop. It wasn't supposed to be something like that. It wasn't supposed to be a hashtag 3 times a day when I type it. It was supposed to be, are you going to continue to do the things our friend did to try to make the world a better place? And I wonder, and again, I'm talking to me too, because I know I struggle with it sometimes. I'm saying, don't sit there and listen to me and think, oh, I know who he's talking about. He's talking about so-and-so. Or I know who he's talking about. He's talking about this person. No, I'm talking about you. Are you still trying to be Jimmy? Because I've said it to myself many times. Is that what your friend would have done? whether it was me coaching or whether it was me walking down the hall and not saying good morning to every single kid I see, regardless of whether I know that kid can be a pain in other people's rear ends. Am I treating everyone the way Jimmy treated everyone? Am I being Jimmy? So what I wrote was, I wrote this. So use this as an opportunity to see, are you being Jimmy? Are you still following what I wrote 3 years ago and what we wanted to think about being 3 years ago? I wrote that Jimmy would treat every person you meet like you wanted to be treated. Just said it. Jimmy treated everybody the way he didn't pick and choose. He treated everybody the way he wanted to be treated, including holding people accountable for things that they did not do or they weren't doing. What about this one? I wrote, understand that there will be people who don't like you and don't think that you know what you're doing. They will question your ability and knowledge. Jim knew there were people that didn't think he knew what he was doing coaching volleyball. There were people that didn't think he was playing the right people or was doing the right strategy things. I know I coached track with him. I know he had parents who thought he was teaching people how to do this wrong or do that wrong. I would assume his state championships and all the things that he had done would speak for themselves, but I guess maybe they didn't. But I have to say, he understood that he was doing what he thought was right in the moment, and then he just lived with it. And that's what you have to do, and that's what he did. Do you do that in your life? Do you know that you're trying to do what you think is right and what is in the best interest of others? And even if people question you, do you still do it? I struggle with this one. I'm not going to lie. The third thing I put was be excited for other people's successes. Cheer them on. Champion their accomplishments. I remember when Emilio, you be choked up. I remember when Emilio won the state championship in cross country when he was an 8th grader. And I remember Jim wasn't at the finish line. And what made it cool was Jim didn't see Emilio at the finish line because we had other people running. If you've ever been to the middle school middle school cross country state meet, spit it out. If you've ever been there, you know that it's hard to see everybody that you have on your team running and yet still be back at the finish line. And we had other runners besides Emilio, because otherwise, I don't remember this. And if you're listening to this and you're the kid that he was watching run, I'm sorry, I don't remember. But I remember meeting him in between the two places that you could watch. Like he would have watched someone go by, and then he would have had to turn and go to where Emilio was going to finish at the finish line. And he wasn't going to be able to get there because it's blocked. Like if you've been there, you know you're closing your eyes and seeing what I'm seeing because I got my eyes closed and I can see it myself. And some kids came running over to where Jim and I were, and they were like, he did it. Or he won, Emilio won. And we thought we saw that he was in the lead. You could see it through some trees and some kids or some fans. And he started saying, he did it. And I remember thinking that, and how he said it, it wasn't we did it. It wasn't that I had pushed him really hard. It was that Emilio had done it. That's what it was. It was about Emilio, not the coach that Jim was. He wasn't drawing any attention to himself. I didn't think I was going to get choked up. But I remember that like it happened yesterday. Be excited for other people's successes, cheer them on, and champion their accomplishments. That was that guy. The next thing I wrote was, it's all right to help your competitors. I remember one of the people that reached out to a friend of mine. He used to coach at Lewistown. And he still lives there. His Kids are growing up there. And he talked about how he and another coach would come over to Mason City, and Jim would show them stuff that he was doing in practice to help his kids get better, what Jim was doing. And basically teaching his competitors how to beat him. And I'm sure there are some people that hear that and like, why would you want to help somebody else get better so that then their kids could beat your kids? Because that's what Jim was like. That's what you wanted to help others. I mean, coaching clinics do coaches go to where other coaches are talking about things that they do and what they run on offense and what they run on defense and drills they do. Jim would help other people get better, so get to be better coaches, because then that way they would help their own runners or athletes become better, because Jim wanted athletes to get better, not just Illini Central athletes to get better. And by doing that, he helps that coach be a better coach. That was Jim. You sacrifice your time for others whenever you can. Jim was that guy. After middle school cross country would be over, he had the running club thing, the thing he did with the little kids. I'm probably forgetting the name of it. But they would be running outside in late October, early November. The weather would be dreary and cold, and he'd be out there, and there'd be these little kids bundled up, running, so that way when they got to middle school, they already had some experience, and they would go run in a couple events around the state. And he doesn't have to do that. And he wasn't getting paid to do that. He just did it because he wanted to promote the love of running. Those of you who know where I live in Mason City, I live across from a park. And in the summer, he would have runners come, and they would run like 2 nights a week in July, and it would be hot. And they would be over there sitting on the swings, waiting for everybody to get there who was going to get there. And then they would go run Jimmy's route, or they'd run around town. He had a route that he would run, and he would run with them when he was when he was able. When he was a little younger, he ran with them. I don't know if he ran towards the end of doing it, but I remember I remember thinking, he didn't have to do this. They can do this this isn't opening the gym. This isn't where you got to go in and set the net up to practice volleyball to have an open gym, or because you don't have to do that for either one of them. But those kids could run on their own. They didn't have to have him running with them. They'd still do it. And you could say to yourself, you can sit there and say, yeah, well, no, he didn't have to. And he still did it. Are you sacrificing for others? Are you sacrificing your time for others? Are you trying to help others out? Even though you really have nothing to gain, you're not going to gain anything from it. And you can say, well, if he gets those kids, they'll get those kids to be better runners, then they're going to help him win more cross-country meets. Okay. If you knew him, that's not what he was doing. It's not what he was doing. Never forget where you came from was the next thing I wrote. I think that might be one of the things that he and I were the most tied together about, because I've never forgotten where I came from. I came to Illini Central 21 years ago, and Illini Central has got the version of me that my home would have got from me. I've never forgot where I came from and how my teachers and Coach Snowden impacted me in a way that would help me do what I've done here. I never forgot where I came from. And Jim Newell did not forget that he came from Mason City, because he came back to Mason City and he gave Mason City every ounce of what he was. I don't really remember ever talking to him about it, like the coaches he had or people like that necessarily very much. But somebody here had an impact on him. I mean, his dear sweet mother was here, so I'm sure that probably helped him stay here. But all I know is I just remember a guy that grew up here, and he became a legend here, and he impacted life after life after life here. And that always spoke to me. So I don't know where you're listening to this from. I don't even know where you came from. But do you remember the people that helped you get to be where you are? Because that's being Jimmy. If you remember the people who had an impact on you, and then you've tried to do what you can to give that to others, that's what I meant by be Jimmy. The last one that I wrote and this is probably maybe the best one, maybe. Look for the best in everyone and give them a chance. Jim would try to get, I think I already said it, but I'll repeat it and I'll go into it a little more. Jim tried to get everyone out for track. And when I was helping him my first year, Jim, I don't mean just everyone, like I don't mean every athlete. Jim would try to get every kid in the middle school to run track. And I would say to him, Jim, stop getting all of these kids out here. If you don't know how Illini Central was set up at the time, we were over in Easton. So no one could walk home. So at home, if you're listening to this from VIT, no one was walking home from VIT school because it wasn't in any one of the three towns. Now, the town of Easton is not even a quarter of a mile from the school, but you're still not letting any kid walk down Route 10 to get into town. So every kid that was at a track practice in Easton was staying at a track practice in Easton until it was over. And if you know anything about track and field, you don't go to a practice and run and throw the shot or throw the disc for 2 hours straight. You do it for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes tops. And then the rest of the time, if you're not going to run any event, you're not going to be a runner, you're going to mess around for the rest of that practice. And Jim would get some kids that I would be like, and I love them. I mentioned a kid the other day. I can think of my dear beloved Blake Anderson, and old Blake would throw the shot or disc and then have to keep an eye on Blake for the next hour and 40 minutes. And if you're listening, you know my boy, you know our guy Blake, you know I'm right. And he wasn't the only one. But I would tell Jim, you're getting too many people out. We've got 75 kids out for track. And that goes to the one I just said. You look for the best in everyone and you give them a chance. And along those lines, what you're doing is you're trying to give kids an opportunity to be a part of something. That's what Jim was trying to do. That's what makes cross country great, and what makes track great is you can have a lot of people out. And if you're going to have to cut for volleyball and you're going to have to cut for basketball when you have too many numbers. You can only, you can dress multiple people. You only got so many uniforms and so on, whatever. But he tried to get as many people out so they could be a part of something. Because a lot of times they were kids that maybe they weren't a part of anything else. They weren't a cheerleader, or they weren't going to be in the play, or they weren't going to be in speech, or they weren't going to be in Scholastic Bowl or whatever, but it was an opportunity to be a part of something, and that's what he was trying to do. And then at the same moment, what he was doing, obviously, was finding the best in them. He was trying to find a way to give them an opportunity to find the best in themselves. That's what made him so special. Are you doing that? Are you in situations where you try to find the best in someone, or you just instantly look at someone and say, they're this, or they're that, judging them and leaving it at that instead of trying to find a way to maybe make an impact on them in a positive way? Well, I'm not a teacher or I'm not a coach. I'm sorry, but that's silly if that's what you think. You have an opportunity to impact people regardless of whether you are in that, I don't coach anything. I don't teach anything. Oh, you're wrong. You're teaching. Everybody's teaching something. You might just be your own kid. Look up, and I've been talking for 25 minutes. I could talk forever about my friend. So I'm challenging you. If you're listening to this and you knew our friend and you've got a bumper sticker on your car, or you've got a sticker on something of yours, or you have it on a t-shirt, if you took what I wrote 3 years ago, be Jimmy. My question to you is, are you? Are you doing that? Are you keeping our friend's memory alive by making someone else's life better? As I started to decide to come up with this is the last thing. I'll say, and then I'll go. Thanks again for listening. But I saw a quote right at the time I started to put this together, and it says, "If everything around you seems dark, look again. You may be the light." That was Jim Newell. He was the light. He was the light. Why don't you take this the right way and go be the light? Thanks again for listening. As we get closer to the holidays, count your blessings and think about the things that matter the most to you. Life is good.